Sorry, some last minute discussions going on some of this stuff. We've got a couple of bills to try to work today. The first one we're going to talk about is House Bill number 2346. And with a brief description on what that bill does, we'll go with Revisor Reimer.
So the bill before the committee establishes the Kansas Sports Tourism Grant Program administered by the Secretary of Commerce for the purpose of assisting communities to develop and continue as a venue for sporting events. And the bill also establishes a Kansas Sports Tourism Grant Committee to review applications from communities for grants, determine awards, and oversees the program in cooperation with the Secretary. The Secretary is directed to award grants approved by the committee. As the committee may recall, there was a substantial amendment that is on your S drive to this bill that changes it quite a bit. It removes the committee, so the grants are approved by the Secretary and does some other things, and that is on your S drive.
Okay, committee, so in front of you, you have an amendment that takes the rewrite of the bill that we were given. All right, so long story short, there was a bill written. The people that brought us the bill wanted dramatic changes to it, so they rewrote an amendment that looked more like a substitute bill. And the amendment that you have in front of you kind of institutes that substitute bill along with a couple of other changes. One of them is a local match, and the fiscal note is reduced to 1.5 million because we're going to have the locals also pay because we're not the only ones that receive sales tax on these things, or even TGT, the transit guest tax. And so in an attempt to keep fiscal notes to a minimum, we are asking for a local match, and that's kind of where we sit right now. And Charles, do you want to explain anything else in the amendment?
Chairman, do you want me to go through it, or?
That'd be great, yeah, so okay. You can, yeah, let's do that so everybody understands the new whatever substitute bill.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So this bill is basically a rewrite of the bill that came to the committee. As the Chairman indicated, it incorporates the elements of the bill that was presented by the proponents. That's on your S drive, and a few other changes. So one of the main changes is if you look at the first page of the amendment, you'll see that we're making the grants matching, and they're awarded as a pledge. So it's based on post-event data. They're matched on a one-to-one basis with funds from one or more sponsors. Turning the page, you'll see a tremendous amount of stricken material. Most of that is rearranged. In section 2, we start out with how the Secretary addresses the applications, and the first change there is the Secretary may charge a fee. You'll see in that box on page 3. And then just some language about what's required of the applicant, estimated economic impact, number of hotel beds consumed, and then again, from the original bill, using the Destination International Event Impact Calculator. Secretary can provide assistance to an applicant. Applications also are to include a written explanation. Toward the bottom there, you'll see subsection B, changes that the Secretary shall require applicants who are event owners to obtain grant sponsorship, and that can be one or more sponsors. The Sports Commission, City Commission, Recreation Committee, Destination Marketing Organization, or municipality of the community hosting the event may be required by the Secretary to serve as a grant sponsor, and that may is something that was changed from the original provision of either the bill or the proponent's version on the S drive. There's a provision next there that the Secretary is allocate at least $500,000 of the available funds to projects in counties other than the big metropolitan counties. If you turn the page, page 4, you'll see a balloon there for subsection C and D. These basically, set out what the secretary is to look at when examining an application, when reviewing it, and discuss the grant. And it makes clear that the grant is awarded after the event. It's on a $1 to $1 matching basis. The maximum grant amount is limited to not more than 12.5% of the state sales tax generated from the local jurisdiction during the event. Originally, it was 25%. And the limitation on subsection D, this program is not for grants projects directly involving the major sports organizations and some other Kansas State High School Activities Association, private or public secondary schools, private or public post-secondary colleges or universities. And there's also a sentence there, no grant funds shall be awarded to any project for reimbursement or payment for services or goods that are not competitively bid. So section 3 discusses how the final amount of the grant is to be determined by the secretary. The secretary reviews the post-event report that's required by section 4, actual expenses that's to be provided by the applicant after the event, and again, use that software program to determine the economic impact and hotel nights generated by the project. There is a table that's a separate sheet that was handed out, and you'll see under subsection B, insert attached table, and that is the guidelines for the amount of the grant that may be provided by the secretary pursuant to the level of economic impact that's determined and the hotel night minimum hotel nights consumed. Turning to page 5, section 4, there are conditions for receiving the grant. Lays out the post-event report that must be provided as a condition to the secretary. It just sets out what's to be included in that report, and you'll see that a number of things are removed. There's also provision that, any other information or data that may be required by the secretary. The event report is also to include eligible expenses. I've laid out a clean copy of this amended draft for you at the back. And so hopefully that's a lot easier to understand how this is laid out. It would be what a substitute bill would look like if the committee passed that out. So you can see that at the end, it's just laid out just in plain text, the last part there. The thing I would mention is that in section 5, we're establishing the grant fund. It's called the Kansas Sports Tourism Program Grant Fund. That is the fund from where the grant monies come from. It's administered by the secretary. The money for the grant fund, as the chairman mentioned, is limited to $1,500,000. It's transferred from the State Economic Development Initiatives Fund. And if funds are not available, sufficient funds aren't available, then it comes from the general fund. Now, the amount of the transfer each year is basically written so that it's going to top off the fund to the amount of $1.5 million. So each year, the fund is going to be, the amount will be transferred to make the fund, immediately after the transfer, the amount of $1,500,000. There's a report provision in Section 7, an annual report that the Secretary is to submit to the Senate Committee on Commerce, this House Commerce Committee, and the LCC. And you can see there the items that need to be in that. And then the final section closes out, because there is a sunset on this. This act is to expire on June 30, 2030. And the language there on Section 7 on the bottom of page 6 closes out the fund and abolishes it. And that's what it does.
All right, so some pretty drastic changes, but you guys did have most of that in your S drive last time. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it. And I think most of us can agree that large tournaments do bring in lots of people to an area. It's not just the state that benefits from that with sales tax, it's also local sales tax, and it's also the TGT tax. And in Overland Park, for example, that is another 9% that's on top of the sales tax. And so being that we're trying to keep fiscal modes to a minimum, it's only fair to ask them to participate as well, since they're getting the bulk of the revenue. There was one change that I wanted to point out on this, where we set aside $500,000 for outside of the three major communities. On the bottom of page 3, that originally was $500,000, and it should be $250,000 since we cut the fiscal note in half and have a local match. And also, instead of allocate, it would read reserve in case they didn't, one of those communities did not want to participate, then there would be no way to let the other counties participate. So they shall reserve or allocate at least $250,000 outside. Charles, does that make sense to you? Okay. Any discussion on the amendment, the balloon amendment, bill rewrite / Representative Christy Williams.
Laura, Christy. All right, so on page 6, I think this is just one little piece that was accidentally left off unless it's somewhere else. And I think it would be friendly, and I think it'd be an easy conceptual add. It's line 19 on page 6. The aggregate total of grants awarded each fiscal year shall be limited to $1.5 million, subject to annual appropriation, I think was the language we discussed.
Yes, that should have been in there. All right, Representative Clayton with a question.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know if this question is more appropriate for Mr. Revisor or for research, but all right, since some of the monies will be coming from EDIF until such point as EDIF is exhausted, and it's my understanding, given what's been happening in the budget, that there's not going to be a lot left in EDIF. Can someone just walk me through how much is going to be currently there for the next couple of budgetary years, just to see what that looks? I mean, I would like to know at least something in regards to that.
So, Representative, that would be a question for a revisor or a staff member of the Appropriations Committee. And the way this is written, if there's not money in the EDIF, it would come out of SGF. And no one can really tell you how much would come out of EDIF until the budget is complete this year.
Yeah, I think that's just one of the problems where we're, doing money-related things in other committees, and, it's a reasonable ask on my part. I guess I will ask that separately after we vote on this. And then one more question. All right, so the grant sections regarding 90 days past the event, how quickly does sales tax revenue information come in? So that's, how soon will they get that information?
Revisor Reimer.
Yeah, so the way it's written, it's written within 90 days or as soon thereafter as, that information would come in. So it gives a leeway if it takes longer than 90 days. And I'm not sure, I'd have to look that up, how long that would take. But there is a provision in the bill for time for that to happen.
Thank you.
Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will you refresh my memory of why Wyandotte, Johnson, and Sedgwick were excluded? I can't find anything in my notes why we are doing that.
So the intent was not to exclude those 3 counties. It was to make sure that only those 3 counties didn't receive the funds. So we set aside funds for outside of those 3 counties because those 3 counties will be able to sustain large sporting events. And yeah, this does not exclude that. Representative Wilcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to go through this. I'm a little slow. I figure I might ask the question, get it. Some of these larger events are multiple communities. So would this be if one of the communities could pick up the full sponsorship of that, or is this equally distributed where different communities could sponsor? Does it matter? I'm not seeing language in here that addresses kind of a multi-district area.
Vice Chair Turk said he can answer that question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So however you cut this cookie, one of these municipalities will be the primary host. They'll be the ones that initially negotiate their contracts with tournaments such as the Top Gun one that came here and testified in front of us. Every one of those communities, though the impact will be broad, that community is the primary host. Does that make sense? And then from there, they'll be able to calculate everything else. But if you're hosting, you're the one that's on all the contractual paperwork, et cetera, et cetera. So they're the responsible party. Does that answer your question?
If I can. So
Representative Wilcott.
Some of my kids have participated in some of these programs where the actual host city is actually like a softball complex in one community and a softball complex in another community. So you're actually, it might be lower age groups in one town, different age groups in a different town. Is there the ability where multiple towns can be sponsors together, or does it have to be just one has to step up to the plate?
Revisor Reimer, the way I read this is multiple communities can be sponsors at the same time.
Yeah, there's nothing in the bill that would prohibit that, so.
Okay. That's all.
And just remember, just know that this is not based on the sales tax. The grant is based on the number of room nights and the economic impact, not. So the locals would have to work. There'll be some times where they're going to have to work together on the local match. Mm-hmm. Comment on the same subject, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but notice it does say may be required. So if they want that matching funds, let's say Top Gun wants to submit their application, they better go to someone and get them to sponsor them, or they're only gonna get part of it. There's no chance for a matching. So it doesn't matter how they do it, they need someone in order to bring that money in.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I have, if the secretary is the only one in charge of picking winners and losers, it would be nice to know in a given year or whatever, the total impact we have coming and asking for stuff, both those who are successful and those who didn't make the cut, just to see how much activity would be out there for this sports, whatever.
Charles, there's a report at the end of the year. Can you walk through that real quick?
Certainly. So on section 6 of the bill, maybe the easiest way to look at this is in the clean copy that's toward the end of the amendment that was handed out. So you'll see there that there's an annual report that's required to be provided to this committee, the Senate Committee on Commerce, and the LCC each year. And there's a list of information that is to be provided, and that includes the number of grants awarded, economic impact generated in the aggregate and by each project. The number of hotel nights booked in Kansas, again in the aggregate, and also laid out by locality and region. Total grant funds distributed, grant recipients and sponsors for each project, distribution of grant funds by county, amount of state sales tax generated from local jurisdiction during the event, and then state sales tax generated from the jurisdiction in the same time period in the previous year, so one can compare. The amount of local sales tax generated during the event and the amount of transient guest tax generated during the event. So there's not a requirement that the Secretary provide information on all applicants or applicants who were rejected or not approved for some reason specifically. So if the committee wanted to add, a specific reference to information like that.
Representative Corbett, is that what you're looking for? It's like
Yes,
number of rejections.
Yes, I'd like to find out who didn't make the cut, because we'll never know.
I would imagine you would hear from your local community if because they have to be the sponsor, but I don't have any problem with that being part of the report.
Whatever it is.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But if it would be okay with this friendly added amendment from Representative Corbett, I would say only list the number that applied and would have qualified. Because I don't think you want a list of those that wouldn't qualify. For example, to qualify, you have to have submitted a competitive bid. So if they didn't do that, then they would be automatically thrown out. So would that be okay for those that qualified?
Representative Corbett.
If that's what you want to make for your threshold.
So I would tend to agree that you wouldn't want just anyone to say they were rejected when they have to actually qualify. They got to have a sponsor, they got to have the 250 minimum room nights and so on. So that's Reviser Reimer.
Just clarification then on how that addition should be worded. Applicants that were not approved, but qualified applicants that were not approved? Okay.
Yes, sir. Any further questions on this massive amendment? Representative Osman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And looking through this whole red line gives me flashbacks to every paper I wrote in high school and college. So let me ask a question. All right, I've got two related questions. The first one is on page 6, it moves the aggregate total grants down from 3.5 million down to 1.5 million. But it also then on page page 3 says the Secretary shall allocate at least $500,000 of the available funds for grants in projects in counties other than Sedgwick, Wyandotte, and Johnson. So under this, 1/3 of the eligible grants would be to counties that are not Sedgwick, Wyandotte, or Johnson. Do we have any information as to how many total sports competitions take place in counties other than those 3, and whether that totals 1/3 of the total amount of competitions that are out there?
Okay, Representative. So as soon as we read in the amendment, I had stated a clarification that 500,000 is now 250,000, and that's because we cut everything else in half, and it's a matching grant. And I also made it so that it would just be reserved for in case none of them qualifies. If you don't have somebody that qualifies for a minimum of 250 room nights, we don't want to disqualify anyone else from participating in the program. And so it's now 250,000, and it's just reserved.
Fair enough. I mean, so I guess my amended question would be, is 1/6 of the number of competitions in any counties that are not in those? And I guess mathematically, as we look at it, so On this sheet, the top line here is $69,000 as state allocation. That has an economic impact of $8.5 million and a hotel minimum nights of $7,500. So to achieve the 250,000, you would need approximately 4 times that amount. So an economic impact of about $35 million and a minimum hotel nights of about 30,000. Is that happening? Is that something that is likely to happen?
So the hotel night minimum is total hotel nights. So one family could be there for 4 days, that counts for 4 nights. It's not 7,500 times, it's not 7,500 a day, it's 7,500 total for the event.
I realize that. I'm trying to figure out how large of competitions are going to be coming to counties other than Sedgwick, Wyandotte, and Johnson. And the reason I'm looking at that is, number one, I mean, we're specifically carving that out. And I'm just trying to figure out if the whole point of this is, number one, get sports teams and sports competitions here into the state of Kansas. It is already open to everybody. It is open to every county out there. It just happens to be that those 3 counties are utilizing it because those are the 3 counties that are holding the most competitions. To me, it doesn't make sense that we're carving out funds that could be bringing people into the state to go to an allocation that might not be used to its fullest potential.
So the only other alternative is to remove it completely and lower the fiscal note to 1.250 million, and then let everybody just make their best argument. We just wanted to reserve something for outside of those 3 counties to make sure that everybody was included. Because you're right, if we didn't do something like that, all of the money, no matter how much you put in there, would go to those 3 large counties. And we want to make sure that we do allow for some events in some smaller counties.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess if the argument truly is either it gets carved out or it doesn't get included whatsoever, then I guess it does make no difference. But I guess my argument is just why the carve out in the first place?
Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. They do get most of them, but you're forgetting that we have a lot of tournaments for basketball, baseball, softball in Hayes, Garden City, Dodge City, all sorts of places out in the West that wouldn't have an opportunity to do it. What I'm grateful for is it's giving us the level that we can meet, and it's all the money's not going just to the 3 big communities. So I'm grateful for this, and it can be changed at any time. If it's not being used at all by the smaller communities, make the threshold lower. It's an opportunity for people outside of these large counties to get something done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to say the same thing. Finney County and Garden City is building a facility that would rival anything in the large 3 counties. So let's do it for a couple of years and see what happens. But I think we'll all be surprised at how much some of our rural communities will use this and participate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Clayton.
And I do think it's worth bringing up the point that areas that are more rural get all kinds of assistance and all kinds of money that our more urban areas don't. So, you know, just putting that out there, there's a lot of assistance that goes to these smaller counties.
Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me just point out one more change in the language of this particular section. The chairman did say reserve, change the word to reserve. So in the case that 250 isn't spent, it goes back to the main fund to then be distributed to those of higher or bigger need. Does that make sense? So if the smaller communities don't chew that up, it just goes right back in it. And this bill, as it's written, gives great discretion to the secretary. And the secretary can determine that as those hurdles come his way. Hopefully that answers the question.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, I need a second on the amendment. Seconded by Representative Turk. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All against say no. Motion passes. Any further discussion on the bill? All right, seeing none, Representative Turk with a motion to pass favorably as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out.
Substitute.
Pass out House substitute for House Bill 2346 favorably as amended.
Charles, is that good enough? Okay. Need a second. Representative King. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All against say no. Motion passes. Okay. We need to stand by for a few minutes for the reviser so we can do the child care bill next.
It's crossed out in section 2, the competitive bid process. So I just don't see it, I don't have a problem with it, I'm just trying to find it. So,
Just want to make sure it's in there. Okay. But as long as you got it in there, because that's the way we determine the baseline.
Yep, that's true.
that, the only place I saw it was
Correct.
original section 2.
We talked about it.
H.
So is it still within it? So we passed it. Hold on, John.
Hold on.
He thinks that, we just want to make sure the
All right, committee. We're going to bring House Bill 2294 up for discussion again. And how we're going to do this, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Christy Williams to explain some of the intent behind some of the changes. And then we'll turn it over to the reviser to kind of walk us through the bill, how it sets. And there will be a balloon amendment that'll be handed out in between the two discussions. And so, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank our reviser for helping us on this, and I will let the entire committee know that it was something that we worked on in a group from the executive branch to the legislative branch, and this is an agreement that we came up with. So maybe you like it, maybe you don't, maybe you change this, maybe you don't, but I want you to first start with that. One of the changes in the bill that you'll be seeing, or the balloon amendment very soon, is that we wanted to consolidate as much duplicative language as possible. So that was one of the things that we asked be done. Number two, anytime you see the word executive director, we changed that to director. Now, the position of the child care, early child care or childhood is still going to be maintained in its standalone entity. It's not going to be changed to KDHE or DCF. It's going to be what it originally was. We're just calling it the director. Now, instead of using or including all of the regulations, if we could eliminate any regulations and just put guardrails, we did. If we could not, because it was part of Lexi's law, and I'll let you know where those items are, then we had to maintain it. Those were the things that were in statute in that time period during Lexi's law, and I believe that was around 2012. And I can let you know where those are. Approximately, Lexi's law is quite a big section in there. And if you want to just jot this down, if the sections are the same, they're approximately from new section 22 through new section 45. I believe those, and if those are all corresponding, those are remaining because they were part of Lexi's law and they were part of KDHE's statutes. There were some changes, and I'm just going to highlight a few of those, and then I'll turn it over to Jesse to outline those. If you look at pages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are all eliminated. The reason those can be eliminated is because we put the necessary guardrails, and you'll see those that are listed on your page 6. Page 6, that little balloon right there, basically summarizes 5 pages. So it's a whole lot better to summarize and put the guardrails than listing all of those individual regulations. So that's what we did. And actually, we just put the bare minimum, but we put them in there so that they maintain. If you turn to page 8, we add the waiver option. So if any time the director wants to waive any of these rules, it would be the director. So on page 11, one of the major things that we changed, and again, I'm just hitting the highlights, and then Jesse can go back and pick up any pieces that I've left out. New section 17, line 11. If we're going to begin a new entity, the Kansas Office of Early Childhood, we removed any reference to agency and we put a direct purpose. So the purpose is outlined right here, efficiency being part of it. Also, below, always subject to appropriations. If you turn to page 12, that's another large change from the original bill. Page 12, new section 18. It originally said the Kansas Office of Early Childhood shall be responsible for carrying out the general policies of the governor and the executive director. And we felt like we were missing a key stakeholder, and that's the legislature. So we rewrote it to include the governor, the director of early childhood, and the legislature. And then we changed many of these goals, which you will see on the side, and these goals would reflect more specific measurable outcomes, including efficiency, including easy access, central point of contact, any of the things that both sides believed were important. So those are all listed there, including if you go all the way down to fiscal stewardship. And by the way, if you go down on the right balloon, you go down to C near the bottom. It says on or before January 20th, 2026, and each year thereafter annually, the director shall submit a report to the Kansas legislature that includes the allocation and expenditure of funds and resources, measurable outcomes of the programs funded, 3, identified inefficiencies within the office and system, and corrective action, 4, recommendations for improving fiscal stewardship, 5, updates on changes to rules and regulations because they will maintain rules and regs authority, and 6, all data and metrics related to those services. This part is all new. So we want specific, measurable outcomes. I think one of the goals of this was to follow the funding. Where is the funding going exactly? And so this will help us see it. So that was all new. Turning to page 14, it's actually the end of page 13 and the beginning of page 14. One of the concerns we had was that we were going to put a lot of different programs into statute. And then if we put them in statute, then that might even perceptively obligate us. Now, according to our revisers, just because you put a program in statute, it does not obligate you to fund that. However, there is the perception because now you have put it into language. But it does not require us. And that's one thing Jesse let us know. It does not require us. However, if it's something that is listed already or part of the Children's Cabinet, those programs that are in the Children's Cabinet are voted on by the Children's Cabinet and are funded through the Children's Cabinet, and we approve it. If it was inside the Children's Cabinet, we eliminated them. Those are crossed out because they're already included. They will already be measured. We'll be watching them. Those that we don't need, we just crossed out. And again, those were agreed upon. So we eliminated quite a bit right there. Now, if you go to the bottom of page 14 and 15, you're going to see that now that we're calling this the director instead of the executive director, then that changes all of the other titles to deputy director, including the current Kansas Children's Cabinet would now be a deputy director position. Now, page 15 gets interesting, and I want you to take a look at that. Page 15, we did change some of this a little bit. So first off, it was called, line 8, the Director of the Division of Childcare. We changed it to reflect exactly what it does, and that's the Deputy Director of Licensure of Daycare. So that would include inspections, any type of visitation that relates to that licensure. It would also include waivers that relates to licensure. The next one, the Director of the Division of Home Visitation, well, you may have noticed we eliminated the word division. Some of these deputy directors may only have one FTE under them. So we don't need to create another huge division. So the home visitation, that one is eliminated. Looks like that one is eliminated. Okay, looks like they did eliminate. So we'll make sure that that one actually should stay. So Jesse, page 5, line 9. Looks like it's struck. 15. Yeah, page 15. No, they're going to change all of them. All executive directors will be taken out. Am I reading it wrong? The home visit. Okay, all better. I have the right copy now. I had a committee copy that wasn't the committee copy. We've had many iterations, so that home visitation is maintained. We are good there. Okay, the next change is item 10, page 15. The director of the Division of Head Start and Collaboration is completely eliminated. But what we have added is the Deputy Director of Child Care Advocacy, and that's the position that basically provides that one stop for concerns, complaints, any issues that you might have. We have a direct person for that. Let's go ahead and turn to page 16. That explains the Deputy Director of Daycare Advocacy, so it outlines their role. That is entirely new. Page 19. Page 19 clarifies what a school would include, and it was changed to is approved by a not-for-profit school, verifiable non-public school, an employee or such school, or verifiable non-public school. And so if you have any questions about that, we can explain why that was added. Basically, for summer camps, a lot of times teachers will have those types of summer camps. We don't want those to be confused with daycares. And I'm going to let Jesse go ahead and add if there's anything else.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee. Representative Williams went through a majority of the large points in the balloon amendment. You're taking out all of those regulations that would be codified in those pages 1 through 6, puts in that short description of things that could be regulated when it comes to who shall be a program director or a lead teacher or an assistant teacher. Also on that page 6, it talks about the Secretary of Health and Environment shall update rules and regulations to state that licensing for daycare is not required for an individual who provides care for less than 35 hours per week per child to 4 or fewer children. So I know this is a point that the committee has discussed quite a bit about those 34 hours and how many children. So that is a new item here where you can see the Secretary of Health and Environment and whoever will have those rules and regulations authority when it transfers over to the office will be able to decide that 34 hours. And so in turn, what that does is it deletes the reference to 35 hours in the definition for daycare, which you find in 3 different places in the bill. And so I know that was a large point for the committee, so I wanted to point that part out. There are the waiver items if you're on page 10, and it talks about adding reporting duties to the Kansas Office of Early Childhood, and page 18, where you will find that, even though it's not in here, that's referencing as an additional item on page 13. So that would be taking that from that section and adding it to those reporting duties of the office as they exist in that section. One item to point out on page 16 is that the Deputy Director of Daycare Advocacy, as you see, should be Daycare of Child Care Advocacy. So everywhere in that balloon on page 16 where it says daycare, it should be child care. So that's an important part there.
Let's let her get through the bill and we can.
It goes along with that, or I was just gonna.
Representative Laura Williams.
I
with
just
a
also
question.
had a catch too on the page 16. Page 12 has that where it needs to be updated to instead of saying daycare, it says childcare. I just wanted you to also catch that one too.
Page 12. Okay. Thank you. So then, as you get into section 23, this is where it mirrors all the current licensing statutes. So from there on, it's just mirroring the licensing statutes as they are currently regulated by KDHE and would be under the office. And so on page 19, for example, you see the struck language on daycare facility does not include an individual who provides care for less than 35 hours per week to 4 or fewer children. So this is removed in lieu of that requirement that the secretary regulates items based on that. If we get past all of the new licensing sections, you see those matches. And then, so the last few sections in the bill are the Parents as Teachers program. So 72, 4161 through 4166. And so there, all those references from executive director will become director to conform with the rest of the bill. But there are some changes when it comes to the reporting of grants and awards awarded by school districts for the Parents as Teachers program. So they have reports for the Senate Committee on Education and the House of Representatives Committee on K through 12 budget. And then any grant awarded under the section shall be included in district budgets with proper notation that such grant was awarded. And then review of equity for pre-K programs shall be reviewed by committees on a biannual basis. So those are some changes regarding those rewards for parents as teachers. And then, of course, with some little revisor leeway, there will be conforming amendments to the title, the repealer, and the statutes listed.
Okay, so there's a lot. Again, are there any questions for the revisor for clarification? And Representative, I'm going to start with Laura Williams again. Representative Laura Williams, on can you restate what you stated a few minutes ago? Some people didn't hear you because they were talking.
Yeah, so Jesse talked about page 16 of childcare being referenced to daycare and it needing to be changed to childcare. On page 12, in the balloon number 1, the implementation of childcare policies, I think that needs to be changed too. That was the only other one I caught that didn't get revised.
Okay, so by giving you leeway, that fixes that problem.
Yes, and so to confirm, I'm just hearing that if it's referencing daycare, but not the definition for daycare specifically, it's going to turn into childcare in the amendment.
Yeah, in that one and in 16.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for the revisor? Representative Osmond, did you have a? Nope. Nope. All right, so I had a question on page 6. The box at the bottom on the right-hand side. So there was discussions this morning that the 35 hours would be stricken from the definition of a daycare, and then there would be a shall not regulate less than 35 hours. So that could be changed in the future without having to rewrite a bill by regulation. Okay, so the way this reads is a little different than that.
Sure. So what I'm reading is the Secretary for Health and Environment shall update rules and regulations to state that licensing for daycare is not required for an individual who provides care for less than 35 hours per week per child. So the inverse of that would be a person who provides care for less than 35 hours per week per child to 4 or fewer children shall not be required to be licensed when the Secretary of Health and Environment updates the rules and regulations pursuant to this section.
Right, the 35 hours was subject to change by regulation going forward. So it would not ever go less than 35 hours, but it could get greater than with a different administration.
I think that would be okay with this less than 35 hours.
Okay, well, all right, we'll think about that then and just give you some discretion to make, because that was the intent. Zach, did you want to make any kind of statement?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just Zach Vincent, Director of Governmental Affairs and Education Policy in the Governor's Office. Just wanted to say that we worked on this balloon language with members of the committee and support it as written. Obviously, there's some technical things we probably need to continue to work through as this goes through the process, but we support this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the rest of the committee, on page 13, there's so much detail in that first balloon amendment, and I want to point that out to everyone because we need to be putting that in bills, saying exactly what our legislative intent is, and I think it was a really good addition to this bill, and I appreciate all the parties that did it. To put that into detail and just point it out as a really good thing to be putting in bills so that we don't have to question what our intent is. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further comments or questions on this amendment? Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 15, line 10, is the removal of the Head Start collaboration, and I'm just wondering what the rationale for that is and if it's housed elsewhere than in the bill.
Revisor Pringle.
There are no other references to the Head Start collaboration in the bill and the amendment before you. Does that answer?
Follow up? If the maker of the amendment would explain that.
Representative Williams.
Sure. Again, one of the goals, the overarching goals, was to eliminate anything that we didn't need to put in statute, just not put it in statute. It is a federal program. It is something that we fund, and so working with the administration, it's something that we don't need to put in there. But if there's other comments, Zach, I think.
Zach, you want to comment on this? Because I know we talked about this in great detail this morning.
No, it's not going away.
It's not going away, and they'll still be able to transfer the funding. Zach?
Yeah, I can take that one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's not going to be a division of the office as originally suggested, but under the programs listed on page 14, it would still move over and serve in the office. Like I had mentioned before, it is a federal requirement that we have that. So the office will still oversee that. It will not be explicitly a whole division just because it is a pretty small function. So we will wrap that into the rest of the office and try to find some efficiencies there to have people doing multiple things, including those services that come with that.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Representative Williams.
Okay, Mr. Chair, on the item that we were discussing on page 6, I think we're still trying to flesh out some language, but I would ask for the ability of our revisor to take the intent of your request and to flush that out, because the idea is that right now there's a certain number of hours in KDHE regulations, and that agreed upon amount was 35. But what we're saying is regulations can't go below 35. So that's what we're trying to say. It can't go back to 20, it can't go to 25. 35 is the least number. But another administration might come in and do something different. We can't project that. But what we're trying to do is prevent it from going below the 35. So if we could just give her some leeway to make sure that that intent of the language is included in the bill. And I think she's working on that, but I think it's high pressure.
Okay, yeah, right. So thought we kind of did that with the last, when we first brought it up, that she will have discretion to make that work right.
Perfect.
Any further discussions or questions on the amendment? Okay, seeing none with a motion to amend, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make a motion that we pass out favorably this balloon amendment for 2294.
Seconded by Representative Williams. Christy Williams is bringing it. Laura Williams is seconding it. It's all in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. All against, say no. Motion passes. Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Laura Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment.
Please hand out the Laura Williams amendment.
I can't let Christy have all the fun.
Representative, will you explain your amendment?
Yep. This updates some vaccine language, more so a technical amendment to align with what we've done in statute.
We'll make sure everybody gets a copy of it before we comment. Revisor Pringle, you want to clarify, say anything else about that?
Sure. For anyone needing reference on the use of religious beliefs or the phrase of sincerely held religious beliefs regarding immunization, this is to match language that's used in KSA 44-663, which it was House Bill 2001 that was passed during the special session in 2021 related to employers and these sincerely held religious beliefs regarding immunizations.
Okay, so any discussion on the amendment? All right, seeing none, need a second on the amendment. Representative Sutton, all in favor say aye. Aye. All against say no. Motion passes. Any further discussion or amendments to the bill? All right. Seeing none with a motion to pass favorably, Vice Chair Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we pass out House substitute for House Bill number 2294 favorably as amended.
Seconded by Representative Laura Williams. All in favor of passage as amended as a sub-bill, say aye. Aye. All against, say no. Motion passes. All right, that's all we got for today, and that's all we got for this year. Look for minutes that will be emailed to you over time, and make sure that they're right. You'll have a few days to look at them before they become record. Revisor Pringle, thank you very much, and Revisor Ryan, thank you for all your work on both of these bills. 2 substitute bills today is a lot of work, all weekend long. Thanks, guys. We're adjourned.